Hi, and welcome to another episode of Forward Thinking, brought to you by Forward 50. It's a chance for us to have conversations with some of the world's leading civic tech and public service executives and ask them what's going on in their worlds. And today I am absolutely thrilled to bring together two people who haven't yet met but should right here in Forward Thinking. Amanda Renteria is the CEO of Code for America, and Dorothy Eng is the Executive Director of Code for Canada. And we love the cross-border cooperation we've had between those organizations. We're huge fans of both of them. And I am absolutely thrilled to be able to be the person that says, hi, it's nice for you two to meet. So why don't you introduce one another to one another?
Great. Cool. Dorothy, you can go first. Go for it.
Okay. How far back do we want to go? I'll just do...
I'll way back. Come on, you got to get back.
Okay.
Before the pandemic, at least.
That's right.
Yes. Last year was a complete write-off. I'm Dorothy Eng. I'm the new executive director of Code for Canada as of this past May. Prior to that, I was still at Code for Canada. I was in the director of partnerships role, primarily responsible for overseeing a lot of our partnerships with different organizations, primarily government partners across Canada, but also some other nonprofits and also private sector partners. And before that, I guess I'm a civic techie at heart. Going pretty far back, I went to school, went to university for engineering. I've always been, fascinated by the STEM subjects. And coming out of school, worked in technology development, actually at a vendor that worked closely with a lot of different public sector clients. And so got pretty familiar with how large scale, complex public sector, complex systems are designed and built and made. And with that, a lot of the constraints and barriers that governments, deal with on a day-to-day basis in planning their projects, planning their budgets. And then alongside that, when we talk about things like user-centered design and user research and how do we do that in the public sector, I could see how a lot of those concepts were really hard to implement in the public sector, working on these large technology projects. So anyways, having that experience, I felt like there had to be a better way, and actually that's when this was maybe about 10 years ago. That's when I started learning about Code for America brigades. Kind of gathered a group of folks in where I'm located. We're in Toronto, Ontario, and then so we got together and we're like, we need to start our own local civic tech group and then sign ourselves up as a Code for America brigade. And so we did. So was one of the co-founders of Civic Tech Toronto, which is one of Canada's largest and oldest civic tech groups. Definitely not the oldest and most established, but one of the first ones. And from there, with that community, we kind of got the attention of folks in the public service locally, especially at the provincial level of the government of Ontario. We started speaking to them about the work of Civic Tech Toronto and the civic tech movement, and bringing it back to the work that Code for America is doing and Code for Alls around the world. And they got pretty excited and so decided to pitch in some money to help us spin up a Code for Canada back in 2017. That was I'm born and bred kind of civic techie and love Code for Canada's mandate. Been here since day one as going from the civic tech community, now working at this nonprofit, which is has I guess always been a passion of mine, and it's so nice to now be here as the executive director, but also super excited for the potential and growth to come. Lots of hard work ahead. So that's a little bit about me.
Well, now I know why we haven't talked, because you and I started in May at the same time. So we've been basically in the pandemic hole together, trying to figure it out in these new roles.
Oh, actually, mine was this past May, like just the May that just
just a
passed.
little while ago.
Yeah, like just like a month ago. You're saying yours was like May
Mine
2020.
was a year ago.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
Look, honestly, it's been like
Yeah.
March. It's been like March-vember. I think we can all be forgiven for forgetting what day it was. You've both been pretty busy.
That's awesome.
Amanda, what about you?
Yeah. So I'm excited, by the way, to like just pick your brain on being a civic techie forever. Because for me, this is new. This is new space. My background is public service. I come at this work from having been working in different levels of government for the last 20 years. Starting out actually at the city of San Jose, which has a code for San Jose, and really seen things from the local level of how policy works, of how things work, and then moved on to be a chief of staff. Worked in politics as a national political director for a presidential campaign. And then moved into state government, where I got to sort of see the real sort of bureaucracy of how things work, including technology at the California Department of Justice. And then fast forward, this role was incredibly enticing to me because I just felt like we're at a time right now where people are questioning how institutions are going to work, how democracy is going to work. And Code for America is part of, I believe, and Code 4s are part of what is important about democracy, which is a civic tech ecosystem that is engaged and thinking about the responsibility of government and trying to figure out how to make it work. And on the other side of the work that Code for America does, which is in some very key core programs like Get Cal Fresh, food assistance, tax benefits, et cetera, is really figuring out how technology can help make institutions work again, particularly for low-income communities. And I just believe that both of those pieces, one, a vibrant civic tech industry and a way to really utilize technology in public for good areas, is what will be required to bring trust back into the system. And my hope is that the connection is so much stronger as we look back on this period of time, because I think the pandemic was really a window into, gosh, we need to bring tech and government together a heck of a lot closer. And there's so much that can be done. And I hope it becomes the tipping point for really just a different way of working together, government, tech, and everything else. So this is like the perfect conversation, because you've been in that space for a long time and I've been in this other space, and we can like now bridge it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So I would love to hear, having been in the space of big vendors, right, and moving over, in general, it's so hard to kind of move that space. As you think about Code for Canada and what you can do to really move the needle there, because so many of us actually bump up against some of these vendor issues. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's been super interesting, like our kind of trajectory or journey as Code for Canada, because like as I mentioned earlier, I kind of have this I have this kind of unique background of having been in that space before, like working with a vendor, working as part of a vendor with many public sector clients. And then also being like, prior to this role as executive director, being in our partnerships role, talking to so many people in government about primarily our fellowship program. Like that is the program that kind of started us. Like we've that's been our cornerstone program. It's how we like basically took the model that you folks had piloted like back in the day. Yep. Also so took some learnings from your team. Like we were doing a bunch of interviews and research with folks on your team. We spoke to folks at like Code for Australia, Code for Japan, just like trying to like piece together all these different learnings, and then create some Canadian version that we like pilot and test here. So we're like, okay, here's our prototype. It's our fellowship prototype. Let's go out and test it. And so like, we start all these conversations with government partners being like, this is our fellowship program. Like it is, yes, it's like there's product development is a large piece of it, but the product development is in service of capacity building, right? Like the the whole point of Code for Canada's mission and our desire to partner with government teams is to model these like new behaviors, these new ways of working, right? Like, so using the product as like this challenge or area of focus that like gets people like understand like, oh yeah, this is like why I do user research, and this is how you do it, and this is how you do like user testing on a product with like actual residents or constituents. That it's interesting because when you know when I go out and like we're talking about the fellowship and the stuff we do at Code for Canada, and it's all really about experiential learning. Like a lot of government teams are just like, oh wait, so they're like, so you're like an Accenture, you're a Deloitte, or you're like like how are you different from like KPMG? And we're like, no, like it's like, and then we have to explain the pitch again. So it's almost like we have to talk. It almost takes like 2 or 3 meetings to like get like to the like get them really understanding that there is a different way to do it, right? Like they don't have to follow the same textbook way of building technology, of like going out to a vendor, going through the kind of like traditional RFP or like procurement process. There are other ways, but that kind of that kind of like journey to get a government team realizing that is like it's like commitment, right? Like because it's like it takes time. It's like lots of conversations.
Yeah, like what is the trick I can get so that you can then see it and feel it and touch it and go like, oh, now I get it.
Exactly, yeah. And so actually once we had our first kind of fellowship cohort under our belt, then we had those projects to show. Then things started getting easier, right? We're like, okay, great. We have some stories to tell. We have like, now let's tell them. Let's like, we'll do a showcase. We'll show it. We'll demo the product. We'll talk about the learnings that go with all of the product. But yeah, it's been, and so now we're at a pace where like we're at a place where we have momentum to kind of work with. And so I would say what I've noticed, at least in our community of government teams or organizations that we largely talk to, is that and who are interested in working with Code for Canada, is that I feel like we're kind of approaching the point where we're almost at the edges of this bubble of like awareness and understanding and buy-in of those like maybe kind of early adopters in like the digital government or like digital government space and like that kind of ideology. And so now it's like, how do we who's beyond the bubble, right? And there's like that's like 95% of the public sector in Canada. And so for us, this is the part, like, how do we get over that hump? How do we get to the governments who like to be honest, like I bet a lot of those governments who we're not getting in front of and who don't even have like the time or space to like take a step back and be like, wait, there's a Code for Canada that we can work with. Because I bet a lot of them are like, municipal governments who are, they're on the ground, they're dealing, and at this moment, like dealing with COVID and everything that's going to happen after COVID. And they're just scrambling to like keep up with the day to day. And those are the kind of groups that we're really keen to, coming out of this pandemic, to like get in front of, to like help them realize like, yeah, there is another way. Like, there's the vendor way, which you can still do, but there's also other ways that will help you to become like, like not that the vendor way is bad, but it's like, what we aim to do is to help build the capacity so that public sector teams can better, work with vendors going forward. Because we absolutely believe that vendors will be, there's a place for them in the future, but it's just like elevating, public sector teams like capability and confidence in working with those vendors is where we want to see ourselves playing a role. Yeah, so that's my.
Well, it's interesting because it's one of the things that we often work with, right? Which is like how much do you go? You build one relationship, and then how deep do you go? Versus going, there's more places we need to be in this country, right? And partly we did during the pandemic, just because everyone sort of needed help on a lot of these newer programs that had just come out. We got a real view of working across the country in different states. And what we did learn is a lot of states didn't know what other states were doing. And what was interesting is when there was a like vendor, all of a sudden you change the dynamic when you have a couple of states saying they're all reaching the same problem. Like, can we just do something about this in order to get kids resources? Like, can we do? And I found that to be one of the key lessons during the pandemic of, because it's really hard when you build the relationship that you just want to go deeper with them because you're like, oh, you're doing good work and I want to now help you with this next program. But that balance has actually been for us a real push this past year to say, wait a second, there's some real pressure points that are different, or at least collaboration efforts that are different that really could take things to that next level.
That's super interesting.
So that's been interesting for us. Nonetheless, you also like want to do both, right? Like we want to go deeper into integration benefits and we want to help more people with food assistance.
Yeah. And that's interesting because when you say trying to like figure out those pressure points and what are the other broader areas that you can kind of like start to spread your energy around, what do you have some in mind that like are top priorities? Or
I do, which comes from in some ways my experience in government. I mean, everyone always like sort of views government as, gosh, it's so slow. And I often say it's slow until it's not. And then it's really fast, right? And so what that means is when the window is open, that's the time to run. And looking across the country in America right now, not only is the desire for government systems saying, oh my gosh, I got to now like reach people digitally. I never really had to do that, or my team can't come in the department anymore. What do we do? And so there's this whole rethinking, or at least openness right now to that. But the other piece is we do a lot of work in, our brigades do a lot of mutual aid work. Our fellows do work on the front lines with, folks, lower income folks, and they bring in lived experience as a fellow. And so the other part of the issues that we are actually trying to address, or the programs we're trying to address, are really in the news right now, right? I mean, that part. So on both fronts, we're sort of leaning in and seeing this as the window is wide open. And I think I wake up every day going, oh my God, it's going to close. How can we do as much as possible right now? Right. And so we're not going, in some ways, we're almost sharing a heck of a lot of best practices and trying to sort of help states deal with the realities right in front of them, as opposed to going really deep and saying, we got a program for you for the next 4 years. This is what you need to do, because no one can handle that right now. Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting time, I think, in terms of the work that we do. Are you guys in the same space, like especially like as your fellows are out there? Is there more of an openness to what they're offering in cities?
Yeah, I mean, so I'd say what we see is what I've seen going into the pandemic, and my hypothesis coming out of the pandemic is within governments, and this is a theory, and I'm like, it kind of aligns with like what we're seeing generally around the world with the pandemic, is that there's like, the groups or the people or the communities with that have that, like the haves and the have-nots, like that kind of thing, where like there are certain government groups, government organizations for us that, for example, the federal government, they naturally they have the largest budget. And so those are the groups that come to Code for Canada with a bit more leeway or like space to explore the ability to bring in fellows, because to also just preface, the way we run as a nonprofit, like Code for Canada, is we're basically like a fee-for-service social enterprise if you looked at it from certain angles. So governments pay a program fee, like a lump sum, to then have fellows who come in and deliver a product, but also work with them and like coach them in these modern digital tools and practices. So because that's our model.
So you pay for the program, but not the training. Like if you're sharing best practices.
So you pay for the program, and the program includes everything. So it includes like our ability to go out and recruit some fellows. It pays for Code for Canada staff also like onboarding, getting fellows ready and primed to work in government. It also pays for training for government teams as well, that like goes alongside with that experience of working with fellows. So it's almost like this one package, right? And we've chosen to primarily go this route because the like philanthropic landscape in Canada, I think, is quite different from how it is in the U.S. This is what I've from what I've read online, and so like here in Canada, like philanthropy is certainly like a thing that is celebrated and like is a large part of our economy, but probably like a lot smaller than it is in the U.S. And it's because I think there's many reasons for that, but I think one of the main reasons is like the way that our laws like define nonprofits, and there's nonprofits and charities, and Code for Canada isn't a charity. We're still a nonprofit, and so I think there's like kind of different structural limitations, and so as a result, the way we've sustained ourselves is through this kind of fee for service model with government partners. And so as a result, when we work with governments, what that yields is like a lot of our government partners primarily are within larger institutions. So like the federal government, provincial governments, where budgets are a bit bigger. The municipal governments are the ones where we're actually still iterating and like testing how to like best support them, because their budgets are smaller. And they also are, like I mentioned, like that fact of like coming out of the pandemic, they're still probably going to be slammed with like having to deal with the post pandemic effects on like in their day-to-day work. So yeah, like we're still trying to figure out like how to meet local governments where they are, and that's still a huge area of discovery for us and like learning curve. But one that we're really keen to sink our teeth into coming out of all this. But yeah, I would say I'm trying to remember what was the original question. Oh yeah, it was like it was the yeah. So I think that like in terms of where we're going to be investing our time and who we'll be working most closely with, it's going to be quite different, I think, in terms of like how we work with the larger governments, like the federal government and provincials, and then versus like the smaller municipal ones, where there is quite a lot of space for like discovery and understanding. Hey, Alistair.
Hey, I have questions. This is fascinating, but I'm selfishly going to interject here. I know that in Canada, Code for Canada kind of embeds with government departments. So we actually have a workshop tomorrow on speculative design being taught by some of your fellows who were embedded in ESDC with Pia Andrews and are teaching some of the stuff they came out about how to do speculative design. And when I talked to Laure Luchesi from Paris a few weeks ago, they actually embedded people in her digital group, which is part of the government, but it's like a digital department, in with politicians. So the member of parliament or the minister would have somebody who, when the minister had something in their schedule that was related to technology, this person would go, here are the 5 things you should care about that affect this. And apparently those people became better at writing legislation that could be turned into code. And I'm not sure that Code for America has the same kind of embedding approach where you like become part of the group. So maybe you can talk about the similarities and the differences of how you actually place the fellows in, and like what kind of authority and responsibility they get within the government department and how long that lasts.
Yeah, so we embed them in cities, right? So we work with the city to go, what is the project you want to work on? Re-entry, procurement, and then we find a fellow that really matches. One of the pieces that's very important to us, particularly this year and last year, is ensuring that we have folks with lived experience come in. And what we have learned is when you have somebody that comes into a project and they really bring their experience with them and they've been through it, they're actually able to not just bring advocacy groups and community groups together in a very trusted way, but they have key insights where there's not as much of a learning curve, right? They remember what kinds of things were good and what kinds of things didn't work, and how do we make it better? And so for a host of reasons, we have seen this model be even better than what we've seen on fellowship programs where we didn't intentionally find lived experience and match. So
lived experience, you mean like if it's something about overturning cannabis convictions, it's someone who's had to deal with that themselves, right?
We work on a housing homeless issue, somebody who experienced that. Just wanting to make sure that we're matching those things. And it really does help in the work, in the process, in the advocacy of it all. And we're hoping, we're 2 years into this, but we're hoping it also adds to the stickiness that the city themselves own it as well, right? Because you've also given them a story. Like, we've figured this out with real experts who understand what was going on.
It's also politically more defensible because no one's going to accuse you of like preaching from an ivory tower if somebody actually has that. So I think in today's political climate, it probably makes it more palpable as well to say, look, this wasn't just designed in abstract.
Right. Well, and we've seen how government systems often aren't sort of centered, right? So we've always been around how are you making sure it's people-centered, human-centered design? You can tackle it by teaching that. You can also add to that by bringing in the voices themselves to do the work,
right,
which I think is a really cool combination.
No, it's amazing.
Awesome.
And Dorothy, for Code for Canada, how much experience do you expect the fellows to have with the problem they're solving?
Yeah, I mean, we, for the most part, so we're still fairly young as an organization. Like, we've run, we run our fellowship in cohorts, and we're just kind of like almost wrapping up our fifth one. So as of right now, you know, in our first kind of like iteration of this program, largely we find folks who like obviously have some technical skills that meet kind of the needs of the partner and the project. But then also we really focus on like soft skills as well. Like, you know, are they great communicators? Do they have great empathy skills? And then the third lens is like the kind of this passion or just or interest in civic technology and wanting to like, you know, dip their toe into like the civic tech movement, which a lot of them haven't necessarily like attended a hack night, right? Like their local hack night or civic tech group. So a lot of them are kind of new to the scene and wanting and like interested in social impact and like how technology can play a role. And so most often these are the kinds of fellows that we've attracted so far and like have embedded in government. We would love I love that idea of like finding folks who have lived experience and like bringing them in as part of the team, like the multidisciplinary team. Actually, and I'm curious,
how much training do you usually do, for both of you? What's the onboarding like before they go and work in the city or the government department?
Yeah, for us, we do a pretty big onboarding, but what we have learned is what's even more important is actually a mentoring process through it. So we put them with a mentor. We also bring a cohort together to do it together. All of those aspects are in the program because we learned, right? We're like, okay, yes, there's a training that was good, not enough. Right now we need like partners and cohorts, and that's really helpful to share what's happening in other cities. And then we moved on to mentor efforts as they're going through the process. So it's quite a lot of support. And by the way, it makes it more fun because you really do feel like we're kind of different for all those folks in government. And I want to be still fired up about this work. How do I share this? Because those folks are almost speaking a different language. I'm hoping over time it won't feel exactly like that we have enough talent and conversation and taught enough people within the government themselves that it almost feels special project as opposed to special language, special culture, you know, special everything coming in to try and help.
Yeah, I like that a lot. On our side, we do also spend a lot of time onboarding. Like we'll onboard fellows for, previously when we were all in person, we would do like a month-long onboarding. I think actually COVID has and actually I think a lot of those lessons in onboarding and training and focusing on mentorship were learned from you folks at Code for America when we were starting our program, and have similarly like iterated on our model to also realize like, yeah, the mentorship and the advisory is a really strong adds a lot of value to a project from all sides, right? For both the government partners and fellows. But yeah, like that onboarding is pretty crucial at like, you know, pretty much training these folks in like how government works. Like a lot of them haven't worked in the public sector ever. And so yeah, we do the whole like how our government works 101, and then bring in, you know, a bunch of guest speakers who are digital government experts who have been around the block, you know, once or twice, to help show the fellows that like it's going to be tough, but there's going to be a lot of learning, and it's like an amazing experience. So.
So the other question I had, and then I'll stop interrupting the two of you. We had a speaker last year from Code for America, and she's going to join us again this year, Jasmine Latimer. And she's in this amazing, I loved her angle that forms are bad because a form can't suggest what else you could do. So like if I give you a form, I'm placing all the burden on the denizen, the citizen, the wrongfully convicted, whoever that person is, to apply, as opposed to the government's systems to be able to say, here's how I can help you. And I know in Canada, we have these Service Canada centers where you walk in looking for one thing, and it's okay for the person behind the counter to say, hey, by the way, here's the child tax credit you're not currently getting, or did you know there's this school lunch program that might help you, or whatever. It feels like that's a thing that the Code for Alls around the world keeps suggesting, is like, hey, we think that you can be proactive instead of reactive. I had to look for one consistent pattern from the days when I worked with Code for America fellows years and years ago. It was always about, like that one was about recidivism and failure to appear rates in Kentucky. And even then it was like, how do we tell the person they're supposed to have a court date as opposed to them knowing it and then getting in trouble for not knowing it? It seems like so much of this is that the interface to government has traditionally been on the shoulders of the citizen, on the shoulders of the denizen, right? And that we're saying that now the government has gone digital and code can act autonomously in a way that a form can't, that we have to shift that to the government telling the citizens, here are the things that we can do to help you, here are the things you can take advantage of. But that's not how the sort of nudge versus sludge thing works. So there's what the government says it has as programs, but in some ways it's kind of like when McDonald's runs McMillions and they just assume that people will throw out their cup and they'll never have to award the prizes, right? There's the actual money allocated to the budget, and then there's the amount that we actually have to claim on that. And so it seems like there's a conflict of incentives between civic tech, which is like, we should be pushing everything we can to the citizens, and governments who are like, we like to state huge funding for programs that never fully gets claimed by citizens. It feels like civic tech is where those, and I'm saying things maybe the two of you can't, but my perception is that it feels like this is a place where civic tech is at loggerheads with the system. And I'd love to learn more about that, because I feel like most of the interesting discussions I've had with civic technologists are around proactive versus reactive government systems.
I was just on a hearing fairly recently and had to testify. And one of the questions that was asked was, there's a lot of folks who are sitting in the halls of Congress who believe that government's role is to create the thing and the people should come to it. And, you could see the group of social entrepreneurs, civic technologists go, huh? Right? But I think it's important to understand that, these big marble buildings were set in place like that, right? And so it is true that we are building from working with systems that are by and large sort of stuck big marble and sitting there. And so it is important to go, how do you now bring that building or tear it down, right? Tear it down and start anew where the building doesn't exist. So I just kind of want to say to that, like, I get the big mound we are trying to, or what we're trying to change here. But on the question of proactive, and I've kind of gone back and forth. If I could choose, what would government be? Would it be proactive or would it be iterative? And I think I might choose the latter, because there are times where government is like, we're going to do this big program and yes, here you go, right? And it doesn't quite work out. And so I think what I would choose, not that I can choose either, but I would choose actually an iterative mindset, because if we have that, that will in itself make you proactive, but in a way that moves and changes with an evolving economy and evolving population and evolving times. So that's how I would see it. I don't know. What about you, Dorothy?
I love it. Like, yeah, like, totally agree. Like that. So like we're so fortunate to work with, a ton of government teams and like public servants that, as I mentioned earlier, like they're kind of the early adopters of, civic tech and digital government. And, when we're working with these folks and their teams and their managers and managers, like I can see that there's this like need, right? There's like an itch. They're like, yeah, like what if we like, can you imagine if we went out and talked to people, or like what is usability testing? Like, could we do that with Code for Canada? And it may, maybe they're like, nah, well, maybe another time. But the questions are there, right? Like there's like a very slow desire that's building up. And even like we run this one program based in Toronto called Civic Hall Toronto, which is modeled after Civic Hall in New York City. That is, it's a membership-based model. We had an office space that all members, which were largely teams, at the local government, City of Toronto, were required to like go to office hours or like open office hours once a month. They got to sit down at their desk, like put a little sign up, and it's open to the public, and so anyone can go up and like ask questions about what they're working on or some of their priorities. And those when we were in person, like those office hours there was always like a bit of an uncomfort, like do I have to do this? Like, can I send that other person? But eventually, like you'd see they'd show up and get comfortable with it, and they'd take to it, and it was I think I agree with you, Amanda, that it's like there's it's about iterating on it, right? Like there's we have no idea what's going to happen, right? If a government puts something forward saying like, hey, we built a thing, or we're ready with this thing,
right?
The feedback might be really bad, but like but if the intent is to do it with that intent of like seeing what the response is, and then knowing that we're going to iterate on it and improve, it almost like lowers the stakes and it makes it more less intimidating.
So in Canada, does your policymaking process, I mean, in the States, it's pretty broken, obviously, at the moment, particularly at the federal level, but where it used to be when you put out a major policy, you would do sort of what we would call on the Hill a cleanup bill. And that allows at least for some iteration, right? Because you're able to like put it out there and you recognize, for instance, with the ACA, this is not quite right, or Affordable Care Act, this is quite, let's do this. But that doesn't happen anymore. And that's really made some iteration very difficult, right? Because it's like, you got to sell this thing works as is, even though it wasn't written perfectly. And sometimes it's the written part that's really problematic. How does it work in Canada? Is there a more smoother, syncing relationship in terms of iteration?
So yeah, there might be pockets. I mean, what I'll describe is my understanding at a very high level, and I'm definitely not an expert in knowing some of the systems that our policies are developed, and also maybe how they're changing. But from my impression of the teams that we work with, it's fairly like waterfall, right? Like policies are developed, they're ratified, and then kind of passed over for implementation. And so, yeah, I think that iterative process doesn't really exist in a lot of circles in Canada. And I would say though, like I mentioned there's like pockets of teams that are starting to explore different possibilities of iterating on policy development. One of them is actually a group that Alistair was mentioning. Is we have two teams right now, two teams of fellows working with ESDC, that's Employment Social Development Canada. So they're responsible for dealing with unemployment. Someone goes on leave, they get benefits, and so we actually have a team there working on this kind of like prototype tool, which is like a policy difference engine. So just like experimenting with like this concept of rules as code, and any kind of changes in policy, what kind of implications will that have, in visualizing those implications. And so yeah, like it's still pretty waterfall here. Like like I'd say that iterative mindset is like not common at all.
Yeah, I'm hopeful for the next generation to bring in, right, a different way of just moving things. I mean, I know our federal government, like it's something like 6% are under the age, federal employees, 6% are under the age of 30. And so if you just think about what potential there is for public servants today, to change this up, tech natives essentially, right? That will look at this. And I can only imagine in some of the places that I've been in, like what tech natives would come in if they're like, wait a second, I'm in charge of that? Like, I don't even know, right? Like forms, like a filing cabinet with paper.
Yeah.
I mean, just the opportunity to really change it. But what you are seeing on the front lines is exactly how that changes, right? The stories that create people then moving from cities to states, from program to program. If you were to bet, what has the most potential, like area of change in government?
Well, I think that, what COVID and the pandemic did is it really like thrusted like digital services, like digital public services into the spotlight, right? Like no one chose for that to be the case, but it did, right? With like everything from like being able to see what the COVID test results are to like, applying for unemployment, or like now, I mean, locally where I am, like trying to sign up for a vaccine, like it's a bit of a slog, like trying to get a spot. And if anything, if there's any areas for change, it's this. It's like the awareness of kind of the importance of like, building public services, modernizing them to meet like residents' raised expectations is something that like is, I think, going to gain more awareness across the public sector at large. Also the public, right? Like I'm hoping that the public also has some more empathy for governments that, again, we're like thrust into these like challenges of like, oh no, I gotta like create a vaccine rollout system in 1 month's time. And so I think awareness and understanding, and so hopefully like leading to more, that kind of starts that bigger change is what I'm hoping for. How about yourself, Amanda? What do you think?
Yeah, I'll go back to, the conversation we were just having a little while ago about, building these big business buildings, and people are supposed to come to those government buildings. I think there is a new expectation from the people to say, no, wait a second, I'm not going into that building. And I think that, and I think that's not just true with government, right? As everybody's thinking about, do I go back into work? Do I need to be there, or can I do it from my bedroom, right?
Yeah.
I think just that alone, that things will travel to people as opposed to people traveling to things, is a really strange, different concept that I think does change the way kind of everything works. And so I think it opens up things that, heck, we haven't seen, right? Like the idea of drones coming by and dropping something off might have seemed like so far away, doesn't seem so unusual right now. So, anyway.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of people talk about digital and they see problems with representation. You used to have tens of thousands of citizens per congressperson. Now it's hundreds, thousands, millions per. And we still talk about representation without talking about the direction. It's still the will of the people flows up to the houses of power.
Yeah.
And I think what's happening here is it's not just that the digital creates opportunities for direct democracy, for hearing directly from the citizens, for real-time census instead of a survey, but that it also can change the flow of that information. So I love the fact that, for example, AOC, did here's what I did for you this year. Like, why isn't every government official forced to once a year go, this is what I said I'd do, this is what I do? That'd be great. But that is something that wasn't necessarily possible in the same way. And I think that when we really get digital, it's going to be bi-directional. It's not just going to be the scale of the interaction, but the bi-directionality of the interaction, which I think addresses both of your points, as that's part of what's going to make those things possible.
Yeah, and I just want to add one more thing to that, which does keep me up at night. I think it will be harder to see people that we haven't seen if they're not right now visible as we move to digital. And it scares me. I mean, truly scares me as we think about folks who have been pretty checked out, that now that you're going to bring online systems, you just won't find them, right?
Yeah.
And that is really concerning from a government, from a civic tech, from the public good standpoint. And so I hope, we're all intentional about making sure that people are online and seen, and that world, that broader perspective is there from the beginning.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
I can't believe that we got to introduce the two of you. This is great. I feel like some kind of international statesperson here. So forget the G7. This is anyway. Thank you both so much for being here. It's a pleasure to introduce you to one another. It's great to see both of your faces again. Thank you for all the amazing work you've been doing with your organizations, not just over the last 18 months or so, but to really put a breath of fresh air into the halls of government, because I think it's making a tangible difference. And it's great that the two of you know each other. Feel free to talk amongst yourselves whenever you'd like to. And I'm sure we'll see you both at Forward 50. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. It was great.
Take care.